Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy that you wanted to join me today because today we are going to talk about Eco-Ableism. I asked you guys on Instagram if this was something you wanted to see and a majority of you guys said yes, go, let's do this. Some of you guys said that you didn't know what it was and that you perhaps needed me to explain it a little bit, so this is also what we're going to do today. And then some of you guys said that this did not actively apply to you. If you're one of those people that feel that way, you can stay tuned and then continue watching, because I think this is something that's going to help everyone. And if this is something that does not directly apply to you, or you feel like, oh, this is not something I'm affected by in my everyday life, you can still learn something. So stay here, let's go. Let's do this. The way a lot of people perform sustainability in the zero waste movement, myself included, revolves largely around what the consumer can do right here and right now. That is initially what motivated me and inspired me to go zero waste in the first place, was the, oh, I can do something right now. I can cut out these items. I can start doing this and buying this instead of this instead. Great, this is super motivational, and I do think for a lot of people as well, it is something that really motivates people to get going. But when we have a movement that's largely revolving around stuff the individual can do, we often tend as a community to often exclude those who cannot cut out those products that we inside the movement are demonizing. So today we are diving into EcoAbleism, what it means, how it affects people, how we can continue to grow and improve as a movement, and how everyone can become more involved. Firstly, a simple definition of what Eco-Ableism is. Ableism is a form of discrimination that favors able-bodied people and therefore ignores or excludes disabled people. Those who suffer traumatic injuries are automatically excluded from parts of society because most systems in place are developed and maintained by able-bodied people who do not include people with disabilities in their designs. As a result, disabled people are often left out or ignored. The eco part of Eco-Ableism refers to the struggle disabled people face in context of sustainability and green initiatives. Many of these organizations, movements, initiatives, bands, general green improvements in society fail to take into account that not everyone holds the same privilege. Eco-Ableism is expressed on many levels, from government bans on plastic straws to activists shaming other users of disposable plastic. Many people within the sustainability movement forget that people can have severe spasms and therefore be unable to drink without a straw, or a person can be unable to stand up, thus making them unable to do dishes and therefore have to use disposables to live a normal life. Denying people access to disposable products if they really need them can have severely damaging effects on their quality of life. If I say, oh, you shouldn't use disposable straws, just do this instead. Or, oh, you shouldn't really be buying plastic bags, you should use this one instead. I'm making myself a judge of what other people need, and that can be extremely problematic when it comes to disabled people, because they are often very largely dependent upon products that the able-bodied community has deemed universally unnecessary. The YouTuber Jessica Kilgren made a really good video about her experience as a disabled person with the straws. She actually explained that there isn't really an ideal reusable straw alternative to the disposable plastic straw yet, and that has consequences in her life. The campaigns against straws are often very political and very symbolic, and the people that they end up hurting the most are the people who actually need them. The funny thing is, we have been talking a lot about straws, especially ocean plastic, ocean waste and straws in the ocean, but straws actually only make up 0.025% of the world's 8 million tons of plastic waste in our oceans. It's a tiny fraction, and yet it gets more media coverage than factory farming or fishing gear, ghost gear that's left in the ocean. That is around, it makes up around half of the plastic in our oceans. Or, I don't know, plane travel or fast fashion. Like, all of these industries are much more polluting than the single plastic straw, and yet we feel ourselves drawn towards this conversation. Campaigns like The Last Straw from 2018, I think, is a really good example of how a campaign against a single plastic item creates global political awareness, and this is something that affects small businesses, big businesses, and individuals as well. Starbucks plans to phase out plastic straws by 2020. McDonald's recently announced that they will ban ban plastic straws in UK and Ireland restaurants. Bon Appetit Management, a food service company with 1,000 US locations, announced last May that they will phase out plastic straws, and Alaska Airlines will be the first airline to phase out plastic straws and stirrers. Waste awareness campaigns like the Last Straw Hasn't Serious poll in the world, they create actual results, and for a really long time I have not been able to find any negatives from that, especially. Not until I started diving into EcoAbleism. Erin Murray has a BA in sociology and is a proud wheelchair user, and she made this piece for the Center for Disability Rights. She says, "For many individuals with mobility and strength issues, they cannot lift cups high enough to drink from them. Some individuals with poor motor coordination cannot safely hold a drink steady without spilling it. Certain medicines must also be taken through a straw. Bendable plastic straws allow individuals to drink and nourish themselves without spilling on themselves or others." She also tackles the question of why not just use a reusable straw? Why not just use this alternative instead? Why not save the turtles instead of using your plastic straws? Etc. She says that metal, bamboo, glass and acrylic straws pose serious injury risks, especially for those with the tremors and spastic episodes. And there's also the issue of temperature sensitivity conditions, because metal straws and glass straws get really hot if you drink coffee from them. Pasta and paper straws also put people in the risk of choking, which we do not want. And there's also the issue of allergies. Remembering additional tools for a disabled person can be really challenging, and again, as I said, damaging to their entire quality of life. This brings me to an important part about eco-ableism, which is generally able-bodied people telling disabled-bodied people that they can just do this instead. For instance, just bring your own reusable straw. Why are you buying pre-chopped veggies in a plastic bag when you can just go to the farmer's market and get whole foods that aren't packaged or processed instead? So in 2003, Christine Miserandino wrote an essay called The Spoon Theory, which I think is really interesting. I'll just read you what Wikipedia has to say about this. The essay describes a conversation between Miserandino and a friend. The discussion was initiated by a question from the friend in which she asked about what lupus feels like. The essay then describes the actions of Miserandino, who took spoons from nearby tables to use as visual aid. She handed her friend 12 spoons and asked her to describe the events of a typical day, having a spoon taken away for each activity. In this way, she demonstrated that her spoons are units of energy, must be rationed to avoid running out before the end of the day. Miserandino also asserted that it is possible to exceed one's daily limit, but that doing so means borrowing from the future and may result in having not enough spoons for the next day. Erin Murray says that we have to shift the focus from banning plastic straws to putting pressure on corporations and companies to find an alternative that works for everyone. And even better, sustainability and disability groups have to work together to find a good compromise for everyone. Because a sustainable future where we make life even harder for those minorities who are already disabled is not really a sustainable future, is it? What often happens is that instead of fighting the industries that does absolutely nothing to outphase oil-based plastic, we end up shaming or judging or guilting each other inside our groups, inside sustainability groups and inside disability groups, rather than working together, and that's really unconstructive. So within the sustainability movements, I think that we have to acknowledge that not everyone can just give something up, not everyone can just outphase straws, because some people have different needs. So Erin Murray proposes that we together have to find an alternative that works for everyone. And we have to put pressure on corporations and companies to do the same. So how do we do this? We have to acknowledge that high-profile sustainability campaigns like The Last Straw seldom show the entire picture. And while they're really good for public awareness, putting all your environmental concerns into the use or misuse of one single product is not sustainable at all. And it's also, again, not very constructive, because what happens when you get a straw accidentally? I remember this from when I went zero waste in the beginning, and if I got a straw and I asked for no straw, my world would completely fall apart, because I put all my energy into avoiding these tiny things. With McDonald's banning plastic straws, they are not necessarily super involved in the sustainability activism. They're just creating a green alibi to get activists off their backs. Because if you think about it, McDonald's can do a lot better than outphasing straws, really. So, nice try. Able-bodied consumers who use, for instance, straws out of minor conveniences, like not wanting to mess up your lipstick when you are drinking a drink should perhaps refrain from using straws, because if people who actually needed straws were the only people who used them, they would not be a problem at all. It is the misuse of the product that's creating the environmental effects, and not necessarily the fact that disabled people need them to function in a normal life setting. You feel? Many sources I found actually proposes like a half straw ban, where consumers have to ask for straws at restaurants or bars in order to get them. But Erin Murray and Jessica Kilgren actually disagrees with this proposal, along with a lot of other sources that I found as well. Because going to a restaurant and having to prove your disability can be really, really uncomfortable, and it still puts all the power into like the staff's hands, if that makes any sense, and they can still deny you a straw even though you need one. Like, having to prove your disability is just extremely unethical. Like, that's not something anyone should go through. Of course, this is not only about straws. Like, nothing is just about straws. Straws is just a really good example of how disabled people are completely left out of a conversation that they are actually a very central part of, if you feel. But disabled people are left out of many, many, many vital sustainability conversations, and that's what needs to change. I have previously made a lot of videos about quick and easy zero waste swaps and the just do this instead of this kind of content. And I've honestly always just assumed that if a disabled person watched my video, they would assume that this is not directed at them, which it is not. Like, I mean, if you need a straw to drink, I'm not talking to you when I'm saying don't use straws. But I've never talked to disabled people directly, and I think that needs to change as well, because assuming that disabled people are just going to hear it that way is also eco-ableism, because that's ignoring them in the conversation, which is also like a part of the problem, because eco-ableism happens on a lot of levels, and assuming that they themselves will figure out that they're not a part of it is also kind of uncool. In the future, I will continue to make my zero waste hacks, easy switches videos, but I want to be more verbal about minorities feeling included. I also am sort of tapping into making more serious content. Like, serious content is a weird thing, but I want to make videos and content about like bigger issues, like for instance my video about palm oil production, and how we need to not only get involved as consumers, but how we also need to get informed as consumers, and that's something that everyone can join in on. I think it's super important that we as consumers know the whole picture and not just surround ourselves with a fraction of the problem, which straws, I mean, universally just a tiny thing. We need to be involved in like bigger issues, you feel? But I will also still, of course, make videos about 10 easy zero waste hacks, obviously, because that's still something that inspires me personally, and I know it inspires a lot of people as well. But we can do the best of both worlds, I feel like. I have people asking me zero waste tips about hospital visits and medicines and surgeries, and honestly it breaks my heart a little bit, because you need to take care of yourself. Zero waste is not more important than living and taking care of yourself. Sure, unnecessary and minor convenience products, definitely something that we should be phasing out. But if you need medication or if you need surgery, then you should in no way feel shame or guilty because you need that. And I feel like a lot of our conversations about single-use plastic often makes people feel ashamed when they actually need it. And we need to not do that. It is so unconstructive. So here's like just overall, when it comes to this sort of thing, don't feel bad. Not even for a second. Please, it's okay. The problem is not that plastic straw or that plastic bag. The entire problem of waste is twofold, and even though it's easier to criticize individuals for their use of disposables, what we ultimately need to work towards is changing the industry, is changing the people who work with plastic and force them into creating alternatives that works for everyone. But should you just keep using disposables without concerning yourself with it whatsoever? No, of course not. Should you talk to friends and family about how possibly you can lower your impact? Yes, please do so. But should we as a movement make sure that our activism is always inclusive and intersectional? Heck yes. I hope that you like this video. I'm getting the sun just right up in my face right now, but I hope that you like this video. If you want me to talk more about these subjects, I would be so happy to do so. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know if you have any personal experience with eco-ableism or what your stance on it is. But if your stance is, I'm not personally affected, therefore it does not exist, then just please consider reflecting a little bit more on it, because this happens to a lot of people. This is something that actually affects people a lot. And even though for me, like personally, I've never been affected by eco-ableism because I'm an able-bodied person, but I definitely feel that I should get involved anyway, which is why I'm talking about it. This is not just me and my opinion coming at you but I've tried to find sources from disabled people who really wants to talk about this. So that's where it's at. I hope you liked this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye! Thank you so much for watching this video, and also a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys help me create green, zero-waste content, and I love you guys. You can find the links to my social media accounts down below and the link to my Patreon on this screen. Bye!